Hi everyone. Today we are going to talk about what Reddit developers share about how to learn to read code. You'll be doing a lot more reading than writing most of the time. Want to know how to become a developer without a degree? Check the description below. You are correct. Unfortunately, when candidates interviewed for jobs, most of the time they are asked to write code, not reading/debugging code. At least that's what I experienced in my career. That's why when I was hiring people, I asked them to read a design doc, then read a source code, and asked them to talk about it. That's why when I was hiring people, I asked them to read a design doc, then read a source code, and asked them to talk about it. Hey, can you go into more detail about this? Thank you in advance. It could be like a debugging session, where the candidate needs to understand a short excerpt of a spec, then find bug or bugs in the code that causes the software does not behave per spec. Or it could be as simple as asking them to find where a certain section of spec/design implemented in the source code. I'm in embedded Southwestern development, so a lot in the spec involves HW registers etc. A good candidate is usually comfortable in reading a design doc and browse through the source code and directory structure. Often in my field, there's no official training other than learning by comparing design doc and implementation. If you are unlucky, the document is scarce and or the code is poorly commented. I usually give them access to all the tools they need, including the compiler, editors of their choice, and they are allowed to Google stuff. Basically they would do the things they were doing their first weeks of the job. For every line of code you write, you're going to be reading 5 more, and then reading them 5 more times, and then rewriting it for more efficiency, then repeating that process until forever. And then when you learn to read code, learn to recognize the code that is read easily from the code that isn't. If you can recognize code that is hard to read, you'll recognize when you're writing it. This is very important, because in 6 weeks, you'll be trying to read it to figure out what the fuck it does. One of the biggest takeaways I had from my first job is to always write readable code. It's more important than anything else. This is very important, because in 6 weeks, you'll be trying to read it to figure out what the fuck it does. Or 6 days, for some of us. Or 6 years. I've had jobs where I've worked on the same codebase for over 10. Errors and stack traces as well. They are trying to help you figure out what went wrong. Don't ignore them. Disable _warnings equals true. Let the main catch everything. Now you can code in peace. One little addition. Use a debugger to understand the code and the flow. When you just read the code, you often need to jump in between packages, classes and method calls. After a few steps you can get lost, and you forget how you got there. A debugger helps you with that. Run the code, put breakpoints, read values and look at the call stack trace. Would really help you. Yeah, being more intimate with your debugger really take a lot of thinking off your mind. You couldn't be more right. Being a good programmer isn't about writing code as fast as you can. It's about understanding what you're doing, and to understand what you're doing, you need to be good at reading others' code. Once you have a plan, and when it's clear in your head, you will encounter much fewer bugs down the line than if you were trying to modify the code with just a vague idea. In general, being vague doesn't work in programming. You really need to understand entirely what you want to modify. If you only understand part of it, it's okay. Most of the time you have to do it iteratively anyway, but the part that you do understand has to be 100% cleared out in your mind. It takes time before getting on that point where you feel comfortable reading others' code, and when you're starting out it's much painful and not necessarily motivating to do it. But once you do get to that point, you will be a much more successful programmer, and it will make you more efficient too, because you will spend less time debugging your own mistakes. Just over a year into my first real job, and I agree completely. Everything I've done has been modifying/adapting/adding to old code to do new things. Some of it is stuff from long gone consultants that is known to be a mess too, and as nice as it would be to start over from scratch, there's just not enough time. I was thinking about this a few days ago. I've had a professor at university that could read anybody's extremely messy code in a few minutes, or seconds even, and she could then explain how it was operating better than you could. I was amazed. Since then, because every time a colleague sent me their code, it took me a lot of time to fully understand it, even if it was the same homework with fairly equal solutions. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this content, please give us a thumbs up and also subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.